Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first series of Finance in Action, the webinar series. We're just waiting for a few additional people to come in. We have 48. I think once we reach about 50, we can probably start. I don't see Vincent at all. Right. So let me share my screen. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Very good. So Catherine, while we wait, I believe for some reason Vincent he needs to speak, and I think he's probably in that group who's not able to speak. So we have to probably solve that problem. Right. So thank you very much indeed for joining. As I said, this is the first of a series of webinars we are going to hold, which we call Finance in Action. This is really focused around innovations and best practices around securing greater investment and finance into clean cooking so that we're able to transition faster than what we've seen previously. The agenda is that I will take us through the sort of the background for this particular webinar. We'll have a few words from Vincent Werder, who is our strategic partner for the Digital Innovation Challenge. Then we will go into the presentations by Carbon HQ and Climate Solutions, who are two of the four innovations that we had supported. We will then go through a panel discussion for half an hour, and then there will be audience questions and answers. But before we head into the background introduction, I want to hand over to Catherine to give some housekeeping rules and guidance for the participation of the audience who are in this call. Okay, over to you, Catherine.
Everyone. Welcome to our inaugural Finance in Action webinar. We're very happy to have you all here. So a bit of housekeeping before we begin. To better manage time, we have all participants on mute and have disabled the chat function. So you can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer them all within the time that we have today. We can send the questions anytime from now. We'll be compiling them as we go along, and then we'll be presenting them to the panelists and speakers during the time that we have. So thanks again for joining us, and over to you, Faisal.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So into the background, this series is primarily highlighting sort of the work of the Catalytic Finance Accelerator. We have a very clear mission to accelerate clean cooking transitions by bringing new forms of finance into the market. We are covering four major work streams, which is smarter policies and regulation, actionable data and information, work around core market transactions, and adjacent market engagement and technology. So what we're going to focus on today the boxes on the outer side are all the different projects that we have under these different work streams. The specific webinar today is focused around Innovation Challenge Facility and the Digital Innovation Challenge window that we had initiated middle of last year. So the problem we were trying to solve at that time is that sort of threefold. One is, how do you reduce the time, effort, and operational costs faced by carbon project developers, clean cooking companies? So one is around costs. The second was around transparency. So how do you have better visibility of credits and all the processes that are involved for buyers, sellers, as well as financiers? And the third was how do you have sort of end-to-end transactions happening that connect carbon credit generation to the investments finance and the financing of projects as well as the sale of projects as well. Today, beg your pardon, before, so we supported 4 innovations after having gone through a process of a very structured process of discovering particular innovations, looking at having an incubation, where we did a boot camp. We incubated it for several months. Then we had a process of accelerating them with technical assistance and grants. And then we're now at the phase of scaling up some of those interventions, these projects. We have 2 of the projects today, one by Carbon HQ, one by Carbon Solutions. And we will have the second round of webinars on digital innovations, which are primarily connecting to finance, rather than these ones that we have right now. Our objective of this webinar itself is that CCA provide modest funding, and that's by design. But what we want to do is to use modest funding to incentivize innovation through pilots. But then we want to see how we can support the adaptation of these by the same organization, but also look at how we can crowd in other investors, or how other people can adopt it without necessarily funding support from us, as a way of diffusing innovation across the industry. So with that, and that sort of reflects the character and the makeup of the panelists that we have. We will go through, we have obviously Alan, who's the CEO of Carbon HQ, and he will take you through the innovations that he's been working on. Olivier, many of you may know Olivier through your carbon project work. And he will go through the sensors as well as the methodology. We have 4 sort of market enablers and adopters. Reshma Shah, she's the carbon markets lead for FSD Africa. She joined very recently. She's a chartered accountant, has straddled both oil and gas industry as well as sustainability and banking. And so we're very pleased to have her with us. She worked on Hello Oil, she's worked with Equity Bank, and now she's with FSD. So really pleased to have you, Reshma, with us. We have Owen Hewlett, doesn't need an introduction, one of the most recognizable faces and voices in carbon markets, and a prolific sort of commentator on how to improve the market. So thank you very much, Owen, for joining. James Cooper, who's head of origination in Mercuria, has been in carbon markets for quite some time, including with BP, Mercuria, and earlier with Bloomberg. And has been a big advocate of more transparency, better quality credits, and how do we get better investments into high quality solutions. We have Anantha Rajagopalan, who is the carbon program director for UpEnergy, one of the users of the solutions that we will be looking at today, and used to work with microenergy credits, who'd been involved in carbon project development way back from the sort of early 2010s, if not earlier. And then we have Vincent Werder, who's the global energy lead for UNCDF, and had worked with the Belgian investment arm of the Belgian government, with UNIDO, and with Oxfam as well. So thank you very much indeed for all coming together. And without further ado, I will hand over to Vincent for a few words about why UNCDF partnered with us to do the Digital Innovation Challenge last year, and moving forward, how we will collaborate further with not only this innovation challenge, but further future challenges as well. Over to you, Vincent.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. And I don't know if you can all see me, but very happy to be here. And as Faisal said, we've been collaborating with the Clean Cooking Alliance for, well, I would say well over 2 years now, especially also on the Catalytic Finance Accelerator. And as you know, also for this Digital Innovation Challenge window, which we're very delighted is turning out to be very interesting in terms of innovations in the market. You may know that the UN Capital Development Fund is really about how we can strengthen markets in the most challenging countries, primarily LDCs, although not limited to LDCs, but LDCs are a big focus for us, as are some other markets where there's still large populations that we can consider last mile. And certainly in the energy space, I would categorize large portions, of course, of Africa and that, but also quite significant elements of Asia. UNCDF is very interested to see how we can work with the Clean Cooking Alliance and other partners such as yourselves in terms of how we can increase investment flows in this space. We know there's a lot of attention on this sector now, especially in the last couple of years. I think it has grown tremendously. But we do also find that the actual amounts of dollars and cents that end up in markets and that really help build this pipeline of investable projects is still fairly modest. And we need to do a lot of work altogether to make markets more able and ecosystems more, let's say, prepared for this pipeline development. And so we're very keen also to see how digital tools can be used in that process. And another element maybe to mention here, of course, all of you know very well, let's say, some of the speed bumps that especially maybe the voluntary carbon market has encountered the last couple of years. But we feel very strongly that these digital tools can do a lot to strengthen the veracity and robust data collection in terms of really making and continuing this very promising path of carbon financing as part of the wider climate finance piece. So we are very happy to be with you here and very much looking forward to the discussion and lessons learned so far and how we can work together to continue strengthening this sector over.
Thank you very much, Vincent. So I think without further ado, we're all here really intent on understanding the innovations from both Alan and Olivier. So Alan, over to you to take us through your business model.
Oh, fantastic. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are based. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. It's just a little bit over 11 p.m. I'm very excited to tell you a bit more about what we're working on for Carbon HQ. But please forgive me if I stumble on my words. My brain's operating on 50% capacity at the moment, unfortunately. So yeah, very nice to meet everybody. My name is Alan. I'm a co-founder from Carbon HQ. And over the next 10 minutes, I'll be telling you a bit more about what we've been working on. So why don't we go to the next slide? The next slide, slide number 2. Yes, yeah, here we go. Perfect, thank you. Any chance we can?
Yeah, are you still seeing a slideshow, or is it?
Okay, perfect. Right, so a very quick overview of what I'll be covering today. So first of all, a quick introduction about ourselves, who we are and what we're trying to do. Then I'm going to take you through the problems we identified, the solutions we're working on, the lessons we've learned over the past months as part of the Digital Innovations Challenge, and what we will be doing in the scale-up phase. Next slide, please. Cool. So HQ was co-founded by Eugene and me in September of 2022. Prior to starting HQ, I had a business and finance background. I started my career in consulting. I did a little bit of venture capital investment before joining Sequest Capital as an investment manager in 2021, responsible for structuring investments into Sequest clean cooking projects around the world. My co-founder, Eugene, is really the technical wizard between us two. He spent the last 18 years building software that are used by millions of people, having started his career at Yandex, which is Russia's equivalent of Google. He then worked at JetBrains, the leading tool used by software developers around the world to write code, before moving to Australia and working at Canva, the popular design software and also Australia's most valuable private technology company. Next slide, please. So why did we start HQ? It was really from the personal frustrations I had experienced working at Sequest. So during my time at Sequest, we were quite successful at raising money, and our project portfolio grew significantly. But we still relied on Excel, emails, and PDF documents to develop and manage these projects. This created lots of problems since projects are, really developed collaboratively with teams across the world. Finance, operations, technical, and sales, and typically they're based in different parts of the world as well. And, there were lots of confusion about which figures, is this the right figure? And from memory, lots of painful early morning and late night calls just to see if certain steps have been completed. And not only was this a problem for us internally, it was also a problem for our investors and external stakeholders. I was honestly quite surprised that these important climate projects that are worth a lot of money too were being managed without any proper tools. So I believed, there needs to be a better solution if this industry is going to truly reach the scale of, $50 billion by 2030. So we started Carbon HQ and talked to lots and lots of project developers. We started in cookstove projects, given that was where my experience was from, and soon realized everyone was facing this problem. Next slide, please. Yes, so before getting into our solutions, it's important to understand what project developers are currently using and why it's creating problems. Although some still collect information using pen and paper, we typically see project developers using some form of digital tools to collect information, Kobo, Survey CTO, ODK, etc., and feed this into Excel to clean and visualize using Power BI or Tableau. This information is then kept in Excel and stored usually in a shared drive. The technical team then do their carbon credit calculations in Excel before producing work papers in PDF and Excel to share with standard bodies. We are seeing some tools that do a bigger chunk of this process, such as PowerSolve, developed by Task, UpEnergy, and even Salesforce. but we have not seen one tool that is truly end-to-end, built exclusively for carbon project developers. Next slide, please. So with the current technology setup, we've identified 4 main challenges that project developers face. So first of all, operational inefficiencies, secondly, growing costs, and third and fourth, in terms of keeping investors updated and sharing transparency for buyers. So let's dive deeper into each one. So first of all, operational efficiencies. We are seeing project developers spend very long to get their data processed and ready for verification. And the data set to often still contain errors, which lead to added review times for standard bodies. Especially today, we are seeing quite large data sets for cookstove projects. It's just not feasible to manage them in Excel anymore. One project developer that we've talked to says he's got over 1 million records in Excel, and every time he calculates credits, it takes an hour and a half, and typically he goes to lunch and come back and looks at the answer. So growing costs, we are seeing project developers are seeking solutions, but without an adequate tool in the market, they're either developing their own from scratch or heavily customizing off-the-shelf tools such as Salesforce. I've spoken with one project developer who's got an awesome system in Salesforce, but unfortunately, they've had to spend over $500,000 just on customization fees throughout the years. And thirdly, keeping investors updated is also a very challenging problem. I've spoken to people at trading desks whose eyes light up after seeing our platform because they currently receive volume and timing updates from different project developers via WhatsApp. And lastly, transparency for buyers. We're seeing really even more data being added to the mix now with sensors, which Olivia will take you through in a second, IoT-enabled e-cookers. But how do we expect buyers to actually make sense of all of this information when there's already quite a lot of information with existing carbon projects? So we believe project developers need to present this information in a digestible way for buyers to actually understand and pay a premium for high quality projects. Next slide, please. So with all these problems and understandings in mind, we developed Carbon HQ from the ground up to meet the unique needs of carbon project developers. Next slide. So what will our platform do? The vision we're working towards at Carbon HQ is to develop an end-to-end digital platform to get project developers from raw data to carbon credits, and hopefully in the future facilitating turning credits into cash as well. So this means our platform integrates with digital data collection tools and automatically cleans and processes this information to enable continuous database management, meaning if you wanted to submit your projects tomorrow, you can do so without worrying about whether your data is clean or not. We're also working to automate the credit calculation process by diving into each methodology, breaking them down, and turning them into code, enabling the platform to accurately forecast volume and timing of credit issuances, and allowing project developers to manage credit sales and forward inventory. So in the future, we hope to be the interface between project developers and standard bodies for information exchange and allow data to be directly shared via our platform, streamlining the issuance process. So the different colors for the different bars on this page means green means we've already released it. We've got a functional product for that feature. Yellow means we're still working on it, like the work has been started, but it's not quite ready. And gray means we haven't really started working on it. So the direct submission to standard bodies part, we are in discussions with Vera about plugging our platform into the project hub, and we'd love to explore similar opportunities with the gold standard as well. Next slide. So a picture is worth a thousand words, and these are some screenshots from our product. So starting on the left side, firstly, distribution database management, where project developers can link our platform with their data collection tool via an API or upload Excel spreadsheets directly. Accurate credit modeling, where we are basically taking an emission reductions calculation workbook and integrating it into our platform and linking each factor directly to the source data. And last but not least, complete credit management, where developers can see their future credit production, record contracts, and monitor deliveries. So if you wish to see a demo, feel free to send me an email or go through our website, which will be the last slide of this presentation. Next slide. So what does this mean for project developers? We've identified 3 ways that our platform will add value to project developers. The first bucket is really the easiest on the most left-hand side, which is our solution is actually more cost-effective for project developers compared to other solutions, and they're getting a better product. So instead of paying Salesforce to customize from scratch, our platform has been developed to address common needs across project developers. We've seen project developers easily spend 20K to 100K per year on their own systems. And because our price goes from 10K to 30K, depending on their size, this is a savings of 10 to 70K per year. The second one, which we're still validating, is hopefully our platform will result in developers getting their credits quicker. So assuming 500K credits are generated per year, $5 per credit, 10% cost of capital, every month that we're able to take out of the verification process is $20,000 of benefits generated for the developer. And lastly, a large part of the value of each carbon credit is heavily dependent on the information behind that credit. So our hypothesis is that if there is a platform that improves the management, quality, and transparency of the information, that will create a premium for the credits generated. This is untested, but I think it'd be reasonable to assume a 50 cent to $1 premium for credits where buyers can just double click on each credit to learn more about the credit rather than sitting there in Excel spreadsheets. And we're seeing these developments in the market surrounding data sharing as well, such as the SEC information required to support credit use by companies. Next slide. So very quickly, what lessons have we learned over the past few months? Number one, coordination versus automation. So project developers don't just want a solution to track their progress. They actually want a solution to take a lot of the manual tasks or processes away. So project developers want automation rather than coordination. Secondly, volume of data is huge. Our platform needs to handle a lot of data. And the bar for performance is very high because this information is very mission critical. So we have a lot of work to do to make our platform meet the needs of a project developer. External integrations are key. And we see that as a key opportunity for us compared to an internally developed platform. As an external platform, we can plug into various other service providers like brokers, trading platforms, standard bodies, rating agencies, etc. And we want to explore this further. And lastly, project developers are very busy people. So thank you, Anantha, for taking time to be on this call. And we need to make our software as easy to use as possible and offer really comprehensive onboarding support. Next slide. And going forward, we will, number one, explore meaningful AI. There's just so much we can do to leverage AI to make project developers' lives easier, such as auto-generated project updates. And so far, we've experimented using AI to read serial numbers from pictures that are taken from the ground. as well as to extract technical parameters from project documents. And so far, we've had pretty promising results. Secondly, we want to cover the end-to-end journey of a project developer. So we're right now starting with the distribution data management side. And going forward, we want to essentially digitize the entire process of turning raw data through to credits and then credits back into cash. Thirdly, as I mentioned, keep pursuing integrations with standard bodies, and that's where I see a big chunk of value add potential sits for us. And lastly, aligning our pricing model with project developers. So our dream is to make us a no-brainer for any project developer. And as part of that, that requires us to charge project developers when they get paid rather than charging them before that. So we'd love to keep making our pricing model more competitive as well. And next slide. And that's it, really. So, if you would like to check us out and see a demo, please send me an email. My email is just alan@carbonhq.earth, or you can book a demo directly via the website link on the screen. Thank you very much, everybody, and back to you, Faisal.
Very much, Alan. Really exciting. Before I move on with Olivier, I just want to give an opportunity both to the panel in case you have some immediate questions on the presentation for clarification. And I would also encourage those of you who are also attending, if you have any questions while they're fresh on your mind, please do put them up on the Q&A and we will try to respond to those. So over to the panel in case you have any questions. Okay, none now, so that's fine. So with that, Olivier, over to you with your solution. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olivier. I'm with Climate Solutions, and I'm going to talk about digital monitoring of cookstove programs. But before I start talking about our solution, I want to give you guys a little bit of context about monitoring of cookstove program. And so if we can get to the next slide. There's been a carbon methodology to monitor a cookstove program for a little bit more than 20 years now. Initially, the assumptions were that, when people would get a new stove, that the old stove would be displaced and would not be used anymore. And that if a stove was twice more efficient, then people would use half the fuel wood, that the thermal efficiency of the stove would directly correlate to the fuel savings that you would see in the ground. And we had kind of this model of the energy ladder, where people would start, maybe they would, the bottom of the ladder, they would use firewood, and then they would go to charcoal and maybe LPG or electricity and ethanol, cleaner cook stove, and that they would go from one step of the ladder to the next step of the ladder. And so mostly those methodology relied on surveys and lab tests to quantify emission reductions and climate impact of those projects. And then we had the kitchen performance test that came into play, which is a field test that measures the fuel consumption directly in the households, and that allows to understand a little bit better what's going on. And for a long time, we've had different methodology that coexisted with all those different options that were available to carbon project developers, with more or less accurate options that would give different estimations of emission reductions. But today, thanks to the work of the 4C group and ICVCM, we see kind of a convergence towards of the sector towards recognizing the kitchen performance test as the best way to measure fuel savings, and that recognizing also that sensors and sensor-based usage measurements is also the most accurate way to recognize how often people are using the stove. and now we finally acknowledge also that stacking is the norm, that people don't just, you know, have one stove and they don't just graduate from one fuel type to another fuel type, but that there is a lot of different stove type and fuel types that are used together in the household. And so that there is a lot of complexity going on. Despite all those progress, we still use existing current upcoming methodologies, still use, you know, usage sensor as kind of a binary indicator of whether a household is a user or non-users. And KPTs remain very analog. To tell you a little bit more about KPTs, this is a process where you measure how much fuel people are using, and every 24 hours you have to go in the household to measure how much fuel they have. This is a very labor-intensive test, and in some context, you do have to provide fuel to the household, which create the risk of kind of influencing a little bit how much fuel and what type of fuel people are going to use. And there's been also some report that this kind of intrusive test can create some off-on effects, which means that when people are observed, they will kind of change their behavior. You know, if you're in the house every 24 hours, they might kind of change a little bit their behavior. This is also very hard to audit. And there's been KPT that reported very, very high fuel savings. There is no really good way to audit this afterwards, except of doing again the KPT again. And so that's why we are working on digital solutions. And if we can move to the next slide. So what we're working on is a suite of sensors that can that's fully integrated and that can measure usage, fuel consumption, and smoke concentration, PM 2.5 concentration in the kitchens. This suite of sensor is integrated, and yeah, the picture you can see here is a data logging scale, so a scale that's in the kitchen that's logging firewood. But beside having a suite of sensors that's unified, that's easy to use, that's really just works. What we're working on is also all the data management piece. So how do you get the data from the field to the cloud, and how do you process and organize and make sense of all this data? But beside those sensors and the management, there's also another piece of the equation, which is how do you use those digital data to assess the climate impact of a cookstove project? And that's also what we're working on with this digital methodology that we're developing under the gold standard, which allows us to first continuously monitor cookstove throughout their lifespan. So from the time a cookstove is installed to the house to the time the cookstove is not usable anymore, we have a sensor on the stove on a percentage of those stoves that will monitor exactly how often they use throughout their lifetime. And using digital kitchen performance tests to try to address some of the limitation of analog kitchen performance tests. And one way that we can reduce potential bias is that because we use data logging scale, they measure the fuel every minute. And so there is no need to provide fuel to the household, even if the household don't have large quantities of fuel, even if they purchase fuel every day, we will see exactly how much fuel they purchase. And it's a little bit less intrusive because we don't have to be every 24 hours in the household. We can just deploy those sensors at the beginning of the kitchen performance test and download data at the end of the kitchen performance test without having to continuously be there. But more than that, if there are any change in behaviors, we can actually measure this because we can see how often people are using the stove during the KPT. We can see how often they're using the stove outside of the KPT, and if there is a difference, we are able to correct for this. And so we can address any potential bias that we see there. And so, you know, from the KPT, we can derive fuel used per cooking events, and then this fuel use is used to directly credit the climate impact of cookstove. Because we know how much people are saving each time they use their cookstove, and we know how often they use their cookstove exactly for long-term monitoring, and so we can directly have a continuous digital monitoring of those programs. So that's the other piece of the equation that we think is quite important. We are about to submit formally this methodology under the gold standard, and so we hope it can become available soon. So if we go to the next slide, I want to show you a little bit our usage sensor. They're very small. They cost about $10 per unit. We're working on reducing this cost further and halving this cost by the end of the year. They have 4 to 5 years battery life. And so they can be deployed on any cook stove. Okay, you don't need to have a very fancy cook stove. You can deploy them on a $2 cook stove, and it can digitize those stoves and allow to understand how often those cook stoves are used in the field. Next slide. Another piece of the equation is our cloud platform and our Android app. We've developed that for the past few months with the support of CCA, and we're currently testing this in Kenya with our partner. This allowed to directly download the data from those stove use monitor sensors using an Android app to our cloud platform, and we integrated the analysis of the data that's done on the fly by the sensor itself. So when you download the data, you already know how often people are using the stove. So this is a fairly new development, but we're finalizing the pilot and we're getting ready to open this to our clients more widely. Next slide. So what's the business case for project developers? We think that the first one is higher quality. We have fully calibrated sensors. We were very strict about that. We do a post-measurement calibration and pre-measurement calibration. So for each time you measure fuel, we do before and after calibration of all our sensors. And also you have a fully automated process to measure the fuel consumption, to measure how often people are using the stove. And so we believe that we can increase the quality of the measurement compared to more analog method. The other key piece is the costs. We can drastically reduce the cost of doing a kitchen performance test. Again, those tests are very labor intensive. You need to visit the household every 24 hours. If you do project in rural areas, the cost of visiting all those households is very important. With our solution, you can cut that by 3 or 4 times. But also we're able to scale those measurements a lot. For example, we just completed a KPT in 480 households in 1.5 months with a team of 8 people. And I believe that's about 4 to 5 times faster than if you were doing an analog KPT. Or you would need a 4 or 5 times bigger team to do it in the same amount of time, or it would take you a lot longer to do that. So we're really able to have to perform those measurements much faster. We have about 500 data logging scales that we're able to deploy like that on the project. We're doubling this before the end of the year, and so we're able to do very large scale field measurements in a short amount of time. And the last piece is compliance. Again, it's digital measurements. We have files, and so if you need to update, if you need to audit some of the files, we have all the minute by minute logs of how much fuel people are using, which type of fuel they used, which type of stove they used. And so, if there is any doubt about the data, it's fully auditable and available for auditing. But beyond that, I think what's really key is we're able to automate the compliance checking. And so we're able to detect, for example, if people are not using the fuel that's supposed to, if they're not following the guidelines of the kitchen performance test. For example, if they're using another type of fuel we're not waiting, we're able to detect that and see that, which is not the case for analog KPTs. So we think we're really able to improve the quality. And if we go to the next slide, and it's kind of the same case for carbon credit buyers. It's really, I think it boils down to increased quality, increased transparency, higher trust, and having a continuous digital monitoring solution for all those stove is really, I think, what we need right now to increase this transparency and trust in the emission reductions. So if we go to the next slide. So what have we done so far? So for the past 12 months, we've done digital KPTs in about 1,200 households. Since the Digital Innovation Challenge, we've deployed our stove use monitors in about 7,000 households. So we were able to really scale our solution. This is still a drop in the bucket, though, and still most of the carbon project don't use those digital solutions. The market takes some time to shift, and it's first because we need a methodology that can fully use those sensors, and existing methodology allow for the use of sensors, but they're not really digital first. And so we've been working on developing this methodology. It's taking us a little longer than expected. We're getting there. Hopefully, that will be able to be available soon, and will help the market to shift towards those higher quality digital solutions. But also, there's really a need for a price premium because using those higher quality method, often that means that they are also more conservative, and that a project will yield less carbon credits. And so for carbon project developer, for them to be able to make the step towards those higher quality solutions, there is really a need from buyers to recognize this higher quality and put also a big price premium on those projects to create the signal that the market needs to move towards those solutions. Because this is really what's going to unlock this. Yeah. So next slide. So what we've learned so far is we really were able to materialize those efficiency gains. We were able to scale our solution, and we really were able to validate the increase in data accuracy. We're still working on the cost reduction. So our sensor, I think, as far as KPT, our solution is already cheaper than existing KPTs. Usage survey, measuring usage using sensor is more expensive still than doing a simple survey. But we're working on decreasing the cost of our sensors by about half by the end of the year. But it's not just the cost of the sensors. We're also working on streamlining the data processing and the training because it's very important for the field team to be able to deploy those solutions easily. If we need a lot of expertise to train those field teams, this is also very expensive. And so being able to have sensors that are very easy to use and deploy and doesn't require expert training is a big step also to reduce those costs. So that's one of the key pieces, but also it's about developing business model that don't rely on 5 tons of CO2 per stove, but that acknowledge that we'll get a lot less carbon credit per stove, hopefully at a much higher price, owing to the quality. But it's important also to have business model that are aligned to the quantities of carbon that we'll see, because if we use more conservative assumptions for FNRB and usage rates and fuel savings, that translate into lower carbon credit per stove. Next slide. And so for us, what's next? Again, it's working on this, streamlining the training and integrating all our other sensors into our platform. So right now we're just, we started with stove use monitors, and you can download the data using the app of those stove use monitors, but we want to integrate our data logging scale and PM2.5 sensors into this as well. To provide an end-to-end solution for our customers. So thanks again for your attention, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed, Olivier. Really exciting presentation, and and very, very timely for both Alan and Olivier, your solutions. Just wanted to turn to two things. I think I see Candice and Philip, you've got your hands up. So if you could put your questions into the Q&A, we will try and answer those. And once you put it in, you can put your hands down. I want to just turn to the panel if you have any immediate questions or clarifications before we turn to questions, Q&A between us. No. Okay, so with that, I want to turn to, given that both of the solutions, the use cases, the immediate use cases with project developers. So I want to turn to you at UpEnergy. Tell us a little bit about UpEnergy, what you do, what is the problem these solutions are trying to solve, and how might they solve your problems as a developer and as a business? I believe you're already working with Alan, but if you could reflect on both the solutions. Over to you.
Thank you, Faisal. Hope everyone can hear me well and can also see me. My internet is a little spotty, but yeah, thanks for CCA and Alan for the recommendation to be on this panel. So UpEnergy, we are a project developer. Have been working on projects that kind of has an overlap on both climate action, but also has SDG1 contributions. So which of course our primary focus in the last 13-14 years have been like clean cooking projects that we have done various technologies, and latest one is the electric cooking that we have worked 4 of our markets. So currently we are present in 8 countries in Africa, predominantly LDCs, and looking at various ways where we can create impact in the countries that we operate. So with regard to Carbon HQ solution, so we have been, before Carbon HQ, we were using various tools like, ODK, ONA, Salesforce, and ClickUp, Tableau, and those are like used, different digital tools have been used by different functions within our company. And even in using digital tools, there was always like Excel and emails, that are going on for internal communications. So the expectations are the Carbon HQ platform helps kind of bring all functions that are within UpEnergy into a single platform, starting from data collection, the credit issuance, like project cycle management, and the credit inventory management as well. So we kind of from a business perspective, it's a no-brainer to bring the existing different digital tools that we use into a single platform, since it's available, and also look to expand the scope of use of digital tools even beyond the regular works when it comes to methodology and use of SUMS data, IOQ monitoring, how those can be integrated into the single platform, so the we can able to showcase the integrity and the impact for our projects. Thank you.
Brilliant. And then just as a follow-up, I mean, you've obviously tested the solution. What's working for you, and where do you think there needs to be some improvements that becomes like a no-brainer, becomes a go-to for all project developers?
So Carbon HQ is like a custom-built solution. So the current work is for us to adapt its functionality to our needs. But however, many of these custom-built features can be applied to other Cookstore project developers as well. And for example, like recently, like we have been using like various tools to predict the ER projections for a bit longer than, let's say, like 3 to 4 years. So this has been achieved through Carbon HQ platform for us to be able to model that more accurately, so sales team can able to contract their forward offtakes more confidently with a higher prediction. Then also when it comes to other project developer using the platform itself, I think both Olivier and Alan has already covered. The project developers, and of course standards like the new methodologies that are developed are also having the ability to digitize. Like one example is the GS meter device methodology that can be used for e-cooking or LPG. But the market would move to like complete digitization once the market indicates with a higher price of credits. It can be like more additional investment that can be like put in for like more digits to be able to justify the investment need here. So that's the only indication that's needed for us to be able to like really focus and scale here.
Thank you, Anantha. So actually I was going to come to James a little later, but let me turn to you, James, because you're one arm's length away from the project developer and sort of you investing in these projects. I think Anantha raised two issues as well as both Alan and Olivier as well. As an investor, how might these solutions make your investments into carbon projects more attractive? And do you have any thoughts about this price premium challenge that I think everybody's kind of raising as well? Over to you, Jeff.
Sure. Well, I guess the problem statements that both the companies identified are very clear at present, right? When making an investment, particularly in the clean cooking sector, historically, part of the problem has been there are a series of uncertainties that, unlike other types of carbon offset projects, exist, which are hard or at times costly to get to the bottom of, and some of the the methodologies recognize that and have historically allowed a certain amount of work to be done to try to get to the bottom of these, but accept there's some uncertainty within that, and those have now been subject to criticism, right? When we look at the criticism of clean cooking projects that has recently been in the news, a lot of it is surrounded perhaps some failures to provide sufficient clarity on some of those uncertainties, and that has adversely impacted prices. Now, what those solutions are trying to do is give investors, but ultimately end buyers as well of those credits, and sometimes those are the same people, more certainty of what's happening on the ground, and that's key. That's key for what is different people at different times deem is high quality in a project, but also gives you the ability when you're investing to know that performance is occurring the way you expect. You don't have to wait until the point of issuance. So having the right tooling to enable that is one thing, but also the data collection is absolutely key. And there is a ladder, I guess, of options for that in terms of remote sensors, in terms of other types of IoT enabled data collection, which can come in and help you deal with some of those problems and make those investments or those tons ultimately more attractive. But to your second question, that comes at a cost and a price. Now, we've seen announcements by certain companies such as I think it's EcoSafi of pretty high carbon offset sales prices that align with the cost of their technology, that are far ahead of what other projects are currently receiving within the carbon market. Now, part of that is because they're using the gold standard monitored meter methodology. Part of that is just the very nature of what it is they're doing. I think what's interesting about Olivier's technology is, that isn't just looking at new stoves, that's also looking at retrofitting, because sometimes we need to remember what would be an adverse effect on the people most impacted by these projects is people looking to the future and then throwing out the past and having an adverse effect on the market because there are sunk investments, right, that need to be compensated. So that's why Olivier's approach is quite interesting, because it perhaps helps to add more life to some of those projects. But to the point, you need the right price signals, and what we find, whether it's an EcoSafi, although at quite small volumes, there is some appetite there. But if you, as you go forward, you have these new methodologies, you have buyers more and more willing to realize that the option open to them is now to meet a baseline amount of data monitoring and to be able to access that data through the right tooling, such as Alan's, you get to a point where people have no choice but to pay the right price. And we start to see that increasingly, right? And to draw parallels with other areas of carbon offsets, whether that is people now opting to look at jurisdictional RED instead of project-based RED, or whether that is people starting to, request people are utilizing, newer methodologies or projects in nature have nature-based projects have CCB. The market that started out as a higher cost option, and then it became the de facto requirement, and you saw a devaluation of things that didn't meet those requirements. And I think that's the way that this will go as well.
So James, just to follow up to that, so imagine, you're looking at two projects, one with a sort of Alan type solution and sort of a Olivier solution, and one without. How would that influence the way you would think about sort of investment? Because your general approach is to go for metered methodologies and so on. This is a slightly different sort of set of solutions. As an investor, because there are 2 points. One is about price, one is about whether you can generate investment, right? How do you see this as an investor? Is that something that would encourage you more? Yes, that's okay. You have this, then that's fantastic. Or is it, well, let's see, what happens?
No, I think if you take the reality we have today in the market, with that reality being there is probably not a dearth of investment going into clean cooking projects right at this second because of what has maybe transpired in the past 6 months. And then as an investor, you say, what would it take for me to be comfortable making an investment? One of the things is what is the opportunity you're feeding into where you have confidence that price will both either materialize or once it has persist. And when we look at the market, what we see amongst, let's say, the voluntary buyers is they want the data and ease of access to that data. And so that becomes a prerequisite. So I would say that you would find that having those two things now, again, the data and the access to that data will become a prerequisite in the market for buyers. There will always be that continuum of the level of data, and that's closely correlated with the cost. But I think again, it's that baseline now, and that baseline I would say for new projects, right? New investments are going to require this.
Brilliant. So I wanted to turn to Owen. I mean, we've heard about methodologies from James. Obviously, Gold Standard has been running a major digitization project, and you're kind of building up capability, including bringing in senior managers to sort of drive that work. Where do you place the offer from Carbon Solution and Carbon HQ on your sort of innovation solution spectrum?
Yeah, thanks, Faisal. So, I mean, I think if you think about the cycle of credit issuance, prior to a project or prior to certification, obviously there's the digitalization of the standards themselves, and we touched on that in the sense that there are aspects of methodologies which can be improved or enhanced or evolved by technologies like Olivier's, and also the way then data is captured and reported in the sense of technologies and solutions like Alan's. And that speaks to the monitoring and reporting part of the MRV triad. And then, of course, you've got the assurance itself, the assessment by auditors of the information provided for conformity against the standard. And I think both of those technologies speak to making the verifier's life easier. If you have more accurate data and you have it presented in a clearer format, then clearly it's going to be easier for a verifier to check that. So, potential cost improvement number one, potentially to be validated using Alan's terms, is that if you have that quality of data, the verifier should find it easier and should be able to deliver more quickly, possibly charge less. I think then from the other obvious cost efficiency is around, if you've got those technologies and you can present that data more accurately, more quickly, then you can move to a more rapid issuance cycle. So within Gold Standard, I think this is pretty typical for most carbon programs. The verification frequency is as often as you like. We have minimum requirements to prevent people being sort of 10 years out of date or something. But, effectively you could verify once an hour, once a month, once a year, or more likely most cookstove projects do it once every 2 or 3 years. If you could make that cheaper all around and you could present the data more quickly, could you make that once in every 6 months? So you've also got a value premium to having credits available more quickly from a cash flow perspective, but also your earliest credits aren't 3 years old anymore. By the time you've issued, they're 6 months old. So I think both technologies improve the not very sexy, exciting parts of the system in quite significant ways. I think from our perspective, I do think we need to also think of technologies to support verifiers. I think these improve the verifiers' lives greatly by giving them better things to look at, but there's lots of technology around to support the verifier as well. I think from our perspective, what we're trying to do, I suppose, is think about how do we enable technologies. So rather than us saying it must be Alan's solution or it must be Olivier's solution, how can we set the path for people to innovate and bring things forward and have a system for assessing whether they're valid and viable, but not restricted, saying it must be this proprietary technology or that proprietary, because that's where innovation really comes from. And that's really how we set out to do these things. We're launching a digital MRV program later this summer. And the idea there is it's about the governance and assessment of fitness for purpose, and then a kind of get out of the way mentality, so that technologies can thrive and people can invent things, and competition and creativity get that sort of virtuous cycle. So I think both fit are technologies that are you almost can't believe they don't exist kind of technologies, which is great to see. I think there's definitely a home for them within carbon programs like ours. I do think maybe just sort of two challenges to think about. One is around, James said it nicely, will the price premium come from greater accuracy, or will that become more like a hygiene factor? So how do we, if more and more projects are more and more homogenized, that's helpful in a number of ways, but how do great projects then differentiate themselves, I think is an interesting challenge. And premiums have tended to be through things like co-benefit contributions, strong safeguards, and good marketing, right? Those are the ways that projects have differentiated themselves. So an interesting challenge to me is how can those technologies also root out the price premiums as opposed to the hygiene factors? I think don't get me wrong, I think they will provide price premiums in the short term in a mixed up market, but the evolution of a market inevitably, if this becomes a hygiene factor, then where's the differentiation? I think the other challenge then that we all need to think about is data governance, security, privacy. How do we think about when you're doing a household technology-based project, we're collecting people's household data, their names, their phone numbers, where they are, how much they cooked, and the current system, is quite opt-in. You can turn down a survey, you can turn down an audit as a household. When we start to add things like sensors, then we can still make those opt-in sample-based. But as they expand and expand, how many people are that comfortable accepting that kind of intrusiveness? To be frank, I mean, I love the solution that Olivier is putting forward, but if somebody knocked on my door and said, would you put this node on your oven and tell us how much? It would put people off. So we have a whole kind of raft of new challenges as we increase accuracy. How do we manage the governance and the access? And then lastly, I would say, it's the opposite in a way of the is it a hygiene factor or a price premium factor or a bit of both evolving over time? The other end of the market must still be somehow protected in all of that. Again, James said it really nicely. We've had an evolution where, to me, integrity, the word integrity is bandied around a lot at the moment. To me, the word means the thing you are using is exactly fit for the purpose you're using it for, which sounds really uncharismatic. But what I mean is, it doesn't do more than you need because then you're being inefficient. It doesn't do less than you need because then you're greenwashing. It has to do exactly what you need. And I think that line has risen in the last few years, in the sense that there was a sense that we could develop things that had practicality inbound. As new people have come to the market and not necessarily understood why those provisions were there, that bar is raised. Has it raised because we need it to raise, or has it raised because the perception is it needs to raise? So it'll be very interesting to watch things like ICVCM now, because I think there'll be a realization as you dig into some of these methods and some of these project types that actually there aren't always just black and white decisions, that people were just choosing the lower integrity option for the sake of it. But actually, there's some very hard choices to be made. These are estimate methodologies. You can't measure CO2. And my point in saying all of that is to say there will still be communities and households and projects in places where technology isn't yet available, or the cost just isn't feasible, or they're just too remote, for example. How do we make sure in getting the premium up for the ones that become more accurate and supportable in that sense, and the new hygiene factor, how do we make sure we don't leave behind the ones that actually could really benefit from this, but actually can't access it yet? So there's a few ethical issues to think through as well. But overall, I think the technologies fit really nicely in the M and the R of MRV and support the V really well. And as I say, there's certainly a home in the gold standard to think about these things.
No, brilliant. Just one, I suppose, a quick follow-up question. I think there's been lots of conversations about price premium. One of the kind of key things around both digital and just a theory of how the cost of technology will go down tremendously so if we look at sort of solar systems in the 1980s and the cost now, it's literally 95% less than what it used to be, right? So just from a long-term perspective, you can either ask for higher premiums or you can dramatically reduce costs. I mean, in your sense of just herring both, are we looking at the wrong thing in terms of premium? Because if hygiene is the kind of issue, then premium may not go up. Should we be looking at kind of sort of forcing prices down further through technological innovation, reducing transaction costs and so on? So yeah, just your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of lazy answer is a bit of both, isn't it? And I do think, to not be too lazy about it. I mean, clearly, better monitored, more accurate projects have a better chance of getting a good price and mitigating the risk of market failure. Like, if there's a criticism that comes through about a given sector, and the project's able to say, well, look, we have all this stuff, like we're not in that group, then that is clearly a good risk mitigation as well. So there's price premium and risk mitigation. But also, as it's a great example with solar. It's obvious that technologies need to become more cost effective and accessible over time. I think that's a given, and that needs to go hand in hand with the sort of technology ladder as well, that we support more communities aim higher on that ladder than just the next available rung. So I think, as always, clean cooking is a complex space. How we think about those technology leaps, how we support people through them, how we avoid lock-ins. I do think it's both. I do think there's an initial price premium followed by a hygiene factor, followed by a cutting of costs. On the price premium more permanently, though, I mean, one thing that we should be really clear is that the funding for clean cooking doesn't come from the carbon credit. I mean, that's just a transactional mechanism. The funding comes because companies are in some way supporting these projects and taking responsibility for their unabated emissions. So two things that tells us. One is we need to really sell the story of you must take responsibility for your unabated emissions. So there's just a lot more buyers because companies aren't really credible without that. And then secondly, having an instrument that allows them to take that responsibility. There's a line at which, minimum line at which you have taken that responsibility. That to me is what ICBCM is trying to define. Clean cooking is above that line in many ways, in the sense that you could meet that line with a fairly prosaic industrial program, right? It would meet all the necessary criteria to have taken responsibility, but it's not a very interesting, compelling way to do that. And one of the things clean cooking has is great charisma, great stories, great insight into how the world really works. It is supporting development. It's supporting things that are completely outside the productive economy. So to me, in many ways, it's above that line. It's above the minimum line you would need to take responsibility. And that's where the premium comes from. I think what these technologies are doing are mitigating the one area where it struggles to meet the line because it's such a hard project type, 100,000 individual projects, basically, in difficult to reach places with communities that are, as interesting and as colorful as the rest of the world, right? They're gonna react in different ways, in different circumstances to the project coming to them. The challenge is these are estimates, and that's a very difficult project type to estimate. So I do think there's a price premium available, and I do think these technologies can help protect that price premium, but really the price premium comes from the fact that these are much more important projects to support than some of the others that we see in the carbon markets. So I just encourage the technology providers to think about how we add to the how we add to that, because clean cooking on a basic level has to compete with stuff that just scrapes the bar and isn't very charismatic or interesting, but still is a valid way to take responsibility. Waste projects, and I love waste projects, don't get me wrong, but they're not super charismatic. They're relatively easy to meet the minimum bar of what you need to have taken responsibility. So for Cookstoves to outcompete that, it has to focus on its premium and what else it is doing that those ones aren't. So yeah, lots to think about in that. So.
No, thank you very much. Let me turn to Reshma, I want to turn to FSD Africa. I mean, you've just come in newly minted in your new role, really to help drive and facilitate sort of evolution of carbon markets. FSD Africa has had a traditional role in being a market facilitator in the financial sector. I suppose having sort of sat through and listened to not just the solutions, but also Owen and James and Anantha, what strikes you as the kind of key value proposition for the solutions that's been provided from your perspective as a market facilitator?
Yeah, so from a market facilitator perspective, and really about catalyzing finance for us, it is really about looking at the whole value chain. And what is it that we can do around those aspects of it, but actually bringing in the kind of investor confidence as well. So we would provide funding where potentially commercial, private funding might not go, but with the view that that takes it to that stage. So what I'm hearing from all the conversations, and Alan, Olivier, thank you so much for that presentation, and for everyone else who's contributed. The key things that are jumping out at me in my role, one is scalability. And these technologies really allow for that scalability. And also from a geographical spread perspective, being able to reach some of those remote places for monitoring and evaluation, but also accuracy and quality. And I think those would be some of the key drivers that we would be looking at as well in terms of any ventures that we support. But also in terms of what it drives in terms of value, the ability to be able to do more quicker monitoring. But some of the things, some of the other positive things are also some of the impacts, such as the smoke detectors and being able to link it to health and other aspects beyond just carbon and environment. But some of the challenges that were running through my head is scalability and the ability to have this solution available to a wide range. And what would it take? And I can see maybe in some of the climate solution, maybe that is a bit more price friendlier.
We lost you for a bit, Reshma. Sorry, carry on. I don't know whether you... Hi, Reshma, can you hear us? You broke down. Maybe we shouldn't do the cameras. Can you try again, Reshma? Okay, the line's not working well. So maybe, yeah. I want to turn. So Reshma, can you hear us?
Yes, Faisal, sorry. With the rains, our internet is a bit funny today.
Okay, so please go ahead. Over to you.
I have no idea where you lost me.
Maybe you go. Maybe you can repeat again.
Okay, Faisal, I hope you can hear me. Please let me know if you can't. So I think what I was talking about was some of the positive elements that I could see that would really enable us from a financing perspective. Scalability around really geographical spread, accuracy and quality of data, which all lead to the investor confidence, ability for more frequent verification, value, which all leads to kind of the private sector investments coming in. Some of the additional benefits like the smoke detectors and measurements around health, and a key element part of the agenda for anybody who's looking at a wider impact. But some of the concerns was around really the availability of the solutions to be cross-cutting across a wider audience. I could see maybe climate solution at $10 a unit and looking to bring that down might be more available. But, with Climate HQ, for the larger, what is the range? Is there a turn-down version? So those were some of the aspects that were going through my mind as somebody who would need to kind of look at enabling finance in this space.
And just from your experience, because FSD Africa has also experimented with innovation, the supported innovation before in the financial sector. So can you draw on some of those experiences, particularly the importance of supporting sort of early adoption of new technologies and innovations, and how these can crowd in the kind of support that's needed with additional innovations, other people coming on board, sort of more crowding in of both investments and support, and sort of the really important pieces that facilitators like you can play to get these early adopters to scale faster?
Yeah, so a big part of the innovation with it's for the financial markets and not just for the financial sector in that regard. And what we found is we've actually invested in a number of funds or even directly into digital innovation, because we believe that enhancements on that technology actually leads to more projects being onboarded in that regard, but also leads to further innovation around that space. Now, here we talked about project management, we talked about kind of measurements and monitoring. There are other elements around marketplace. I know there are a number of them out there, but then do we have one place that people have confidence that that's where they'll go? There's other aspects in the innovation space around probably the tech itself. All of these will lead to increased, I'd say increased solutions and different ways of actually bringing the carbon space to the market. So we don't believe this can be done without innovation and without the technology. I like the fact that some of the look aheads that have been mentioned in these two solutions around AI as well. I think that is going to be a significant part in terms of how we take this forward too. And it'll continue to be an area that is FSD Africa that we will also continue to support through some of the accelerator programs, some of the pilots, and even some of the direct investments of funds that we're looking at.
Very good. I want to, so can I just ask Olivier and Alan, there are a number of questions and answers. Some of these relate to you. And there are some questions related to Owen. Owen, I don't know whether you can see, so I'll take the first one. Owen, is gold standard is gold standard? Okay. This is from Nihar. I don't know whether you can see it.
Yeah, I can. Yeah. The question is about whether we'll update our core cook stove methodology, which has an absurd acronym, with the current CCA, the 4C methodology that's out to public consultation at the moment. So slightly politician's answer, I suppose, there. That's not really my choice. I lead the technical secretariat at the Gold Standard Foundation, but approval of methodologies and their updates is with our independent technical advisory committee. We are really interested in that 4C methodology. We hope it'll be submitted to us for adoption in due course. Obviously, it's out to consultation now, so now is not quite the right moment. And then we'll have to think really carefully because there's a few cook stove methodologies now in the gold standard suite, and then the 4C one, which is a consolidation of the sector's efforts towards a unified methodology, which is great to see. So I have to think through all of those things, like if we're to phase one out, phase one in, what are the sunset, sunrise periods? But yes, I can at least say it's something that's on our agenda to bring forward in our strategy. Exactly how that will roll out, I can't simplify as much as the question says, but I can say really pleased to see it, excited for it to be submitted.
Brilliant. No, thank you. I think we've got literally 4 minutes left, so I want to just give an opportunity to the panel members if you have any final thoughts, observations before we close in 3 minutes, and then we wrap up. Anantha, James, Reshma, Vincent. None. Going.
Maybe just to say, I mean, I think this is all really exciting. And again, I believe that indeed in the field of MRV, I mean, when we're looking at big markets, so for example, UNCDF is looking at Congo as a market right now. And this is a market where a lot of donors as well as developers, companies are looking at, as we know, and where there is also a critical link to nature-based solutions and so on. So I think there's a lot here that, you know, again, if we work together as ecosystem facilitators, can hopefully drive investment into the sector at the scale which is required. So I'm optimistic. It will take work, and it will take a lot of detailed work, I believe. But I think there's a lot of very good material here. Thanks a lot, Faisal, for this session. I think it was really great, outstanding.
No, thank you very much. So I think there are a number of kind of themes that have come along in this conversation. First of all, Alan and Olivier, I think you've got a resounding sort of thumbs up, because that's exactly what the market, I think James said that this is what the market requires, particularly over the last 6 months to a year. There's been lots of sort of disquiet and a desire for managing risk, but also to improve integrity in the way that Owen was talking about as well. And I think both of these fit those solutions and to get greater efficiency in the sector. I think sort of all of the people who are around the table actually are part of creating solutions for these kind of innovations. So I think Owen, with Gold Standard, you know, the work that Olivia is trying to do with methodologies, the need to get open API and cross-data sort of connection with Carbon HQ is really critical, and that will really help both of those businesses. James, as an investor, kind of really looking at how even investors kind of supporting and promoting these solutions would be really great. Reshma, your ability to help early adoption and take some of the prime pumping that's needed for these sorts of innovations is really key. And Anantha, I mean, you're at the sort of sharp end, actually using these solutions. And I think some of the experiences that you will have will be really important testimonials for these solutions moving forward. So I think it's been a really good conversation from CCA. We continue to want to support these solutions in their scale-up phase so that we can grow this further. We are obviously having discussions with FSD Africa. We're having discussions with USAID. And would love to kind of work with all of you if you want to either trial these solutions, if you want to invest in them, if you want to learn more about it. We want to be a good player in helping to bridge some of the information and facilitation gaps between these solutions and your businesses as well. So thank you again very much for taking the time. For the panel members, thank you for all the people who've attended this meeting. And we will have another webinar in a month's time for a new set of innovations as well. If you want to get in touch, you have the CCA contact details. Please do get in touch, and you also have the contact details for Carbon HQ and Climate Solutions as well. So with that, again, thank you very much indeed. And we will share out the synthesis of this meeting to everybody after the call. Thank you.